Okay, so we slide in now to number 11 pick in the draft, the Miami Dolphins. The one thing I do want to discuss about this draft that I forgot to hit on, I do believe pick 7 to 11 is kind of the sweet spot in this draft. I believe those are picks where you're getting elite talent, guys that could possibly be in the top three, top four, top five, but they're sliding down from 7 to 11. And I believe this is the last pick where you see kind of a talent break from 11 to 12. So the Miami Dolphins have this pick if they go with the correct player. I believe that's a talent break. Now, the Miami Dolphins, I think, is honestly, again, one of the worst position teams in this NFL draft. They have pick 11. I think a lot of people probably think they're worse than pick 11, just based on what they have going into next year. They don't have their quarterback situation figured out. They're going to move off Tua. We don't know how that's going to be with his contract. It's going to be hard to move off him, but again, we don't expect him to start next year. They obviously can't go quarterback. They don't have a top pick. There were really two, three places I could see his team going. Obviously, they do have some needs. I was thinking wide receiver, but I don't like the fit of Makai Lemon because I do think again Makai Lemon's a great receiver who I think is going to go way lower than expected in this draft. Even though I think he's one of the best players in this draft, I just think him with Jaden Waddle, you're pairing two small type receivers. Like it could definitely work, but I don't see it. I also talked about again at number three. I believe it was again splitting hairs between Francis and Spencer Fanu. So I do see them going Spencer Fanu here at 11. Again, they could use work on this offensive line. You don't know who's going to be the quarterback for you again, and he's going to need help on the offensive line because it's probably not going to be a very good quarterback. But like I said, the Dolphins, like they're not a team like the Jets who are loaded with picks, and I believe they don't have their quarterback. They don't have a top end pick in this draft. Like I said, probably the worst position team in this draft. Like again, when you look at the Chiefs, Bengals, again, even Browns, Giants, like a lot of teams that we think higher of going into next season than the Dolphins, for them to have the 11th pick, I believe is kind of tough. Yeah, like I said, I've been going Spencer Fano. I do think this is like kind of a stealing value because again, this is a guy that's a top five prospect. Like I said, that's going all the way down to 11, and it definitely fits with their needs.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens with the Dolphins next year. Cutting ties with Tua. Are they going to go forward with Quinn Ewers at quarterback? Um, I guess, yeah, I mean, going offensive line, not a bad way to go. I mean, we'll see what happens with Tyreek Hill. What's the deal with him? Is he going to be back with the team? He's going to be elsewhere. He's going to retire after the injury that he suffered. Um, you know, defense also not the best unit, so they could go that way as well. So yeah, don't really have a problem with this pick. Especially if they're going with the young quarterback next year.
Yeah, and like we said, like you just mentioned, like it could go a lot of different ways, and like the teams in front of them don't nearly have as many holes as this team does. So very interesting too. Again, like I believe they're one of the worst position spots in the league. Now again, like we said, there was a break of talent from again the top 11 picks now to 12. I do think it's where you see a talent gap, talent tier break, whatever you want to say. Like again, Makai Lemon is still on the board. I believe is an elite talent, but everybody else, again, I think is kind of like a tier break in talent. Um, Dallas Cowboys again. They obviously do need defense. We saw their defense get a little better with mid-season trades that they make. They definitely don't need a receiver, obviously, to have I am one of the best in the league, and they have George Pickens, one of the best in the league. Assuming that they retain him, their offense is pretty. Their quarterback again, they just really need to stack up on defense. I do expect both of their picks in the first round to be defensive players. I do think they're selecting this player a little early, but it kind of just fits their need. I'm going with Cassius Howell here again, a guy that really just plays primarily on the edge, a guy that can help them out in a position of need. Like I said, I do think the defense is not going to be as bad start to finish, and they are a team with two first round selections in this draft. Obviously, again, they have two first round selections in this draft, but they have none in the next draft. So again, you're kind of like giving a little to get. But I do expect them again not to spoil it, to go defense on both of these picks. And again, I have them going with edge as a position. Again, just obviously they need it, and this is again the position of value when you look at defense.
Yeah, I feel like with the Cowboys and with a lot of these teams now here in the teens, I think you're definitely going to see a run with all defensive players. Like when I look at the Rams and how their secondary struggled in the playoffs, I think that's definitely an area they're going to have to address. The Cowboys, they're like you said, the defense got better with the midseason trades. They got better at stopping the run with Quinn and Williams, but definitely still needs a lot of work with rushing the passer and also, you know, in the secondary as well. The Ravens were a team I felt like they struggled to get after the quarterback and maybe some weaknesses in the secondary as well. The Bucks, I feel like that's a team that needs to address the defensive side of the ball. The Jets, obviously, we just talked about them already with their first selection. Even the Lions as well. I know they've lost some pieces on the offensive line. Um, you know, Going back to last year, so yeah, I feel like this is really where you're going to see a run at defensive players with a lot of these teams here. But yeah, the Cowboys with their first two picks in the first round, yeah, I mean they got to go in on all defense because their offense is pretty much set. Could they take maybe another running back later? I know they're going to bring. I guess Javonte Williams is going to come back, and they got some other running backs as well. But they're pretty much set there unless they want to, address the offensive line too. They could do that. But yeah, their offense is pretty set. It's really all about just getting this defense. Because a couple years ago it wasn't that bad when they made the playoffs and they lost to the 49ers. So, but yeah, the defense has been rough the last couple years. So that's where they really have to address their needs is on that side of the ball.
Yep. So that leads us into number 14. And again, like you said, we're going to see a run of defensive players. So we do have the Rams selecting Mansour Delane out of LSU. LSU's defense was surprisingly really good, especially in the beginning of this year. Mansour Delane, I believe, is the best cornerback in this draft. Um, like I said, this is a team that their secondary is like really really rough. We've seen it get exposed time after time last year, and this is a defensive unit as a whole that isn't really bad. It's just kind of lopsided because I do believe their front seven is very good. Also, another thing with the Rams that I believe is major, especially when you look at their defense, they were a team that didn't necessarily have the first round capital because obviously they went all in again 5 years back almost now. But they were able to build this unit based on picks that they've had later in drafts. Now I believe you got to shore up the secondary. I do think they're going to make some moves in free agency, but very different from again, like we said with other teams in this draft. I don't think their moves in free agency are necessarily going to be dependent on this pick. I think they need secondary, and that's their major need. So again, Mansour Delane being here at 13, the best cornerback in this draft, a cornerback not being selected up until this point, I believe is an absolute home run for the Rams because, like I said, you get the best player at that position. And then again, it's also really like your major need as a team. I like this for the Rams a lot. And then
Yeah,
they
I
also
mean,
have two first round picks. Sorry.
no, no, you're good, you're good. No, I was just gonna say, I mean, basically the same thing. Like their defense got exposed time and time again in the playoffs. And that's one of the main reasons why, they lost to Seattle. They just could not get key stops when they needed to on third down. Even against the Bears, I mean, Caleb Williams throws up that prayer. I don't know what the defensive backs were doing on that play. That Cole Kmet was wide open in the back of the end zone. I mean, and they barely got by Carolina. Carolina had some big plays in that wild card round matchup. So secondary is where they really need to address that unit. They also had some guys banged up as well, but they definitely need to add to that secondary this offseason because that is one of the reasons why they lost, along with their special teams as well.
Yeah. So yeah, special teams and then obviously their secondary is their biggest need. At number 14, again, another team that's viable to pick Makai Lemon and that I wouldn't mind it. My only gripe why I didn't have Makai Lemon going here was because again, kind of very similar to the Dolphins. Zay Flowers, smaller receiver, Makai Lemon, smaller receiver, even though Makai Lemon and Zay Flowers play entirely different. So it could work. But I have again, dumb hiring Jesse Minter shoring up this defense. They could use defensive line help, especially in the middle. And I have them going Peter Woods. I think Peter Woods here is actually like a phenomenal pick and value as well because for Peter Woods, I believe why he dropped in this draft was really just because Clemson as a whole was a dumpster fire this year when they had very high expectations. So when we look at the two Clemson guys, Peter Woods, TJ Parker in this draft, I do think they're going a little lower than expected when these guys were top 5, top 10 picks going into the year, just because of how Clemson played as a whole. But I do think those guys did really show on tape that they are elite NFL talents. Like they could be elite NFL talents one day. So again, Ravens, another team. Now we're getting into the teams that don't really have that many holes in general. You could have added a piece on the offensive line. You could obviously go Makai Lemon. They could go again offensive help for Lamar Jackson. But I think again with the defensive coach that you brought in and Peter Woods still having great value at this pick, I like Peter Woods to shore up the inside for the Ravens.
Yeah, no, I'm in lockstep. I feel like on offense, again, they could add another piece, via free agency, and in the later rounds maybe. But I feel like here, especially with the defensive minded head coach that you're bringing in, the Ravens they don't have guys that can consistently get to the quarterback. So that's an area that they can go. Secondary help, maybe as well. But yeah, a defensive player I think is what the Ravens are going to end up doing with their first selection.
All right. Now we're speeding through. At number 15, we have Kedrick Falk going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you could have went a variety of places. Like, again, obviously, as you see on the screen, they have needs of tight end, guard, edge, linebacker, cornerback. Could have went a lot of different places. My thing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I really don't think you add another weapon on offense. Doesn't really make sense to me. I think they're pretty deep. Obviously, they probably have one of the deepest running back rooms in the entirety of the league. Because again, even when Bucky Irving was out, you saw Rashad White, Sean Tucker all play really well. So again, obviously you're deep there. Your receiver room is one of the deepest in the NFL because you have Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, you have Emeka Ibuka, but then you also have secondary receivers as well that also shine in moments, whether it was Tez Johnson, Sterling Shepard. Like they're pretty deep all around their offense when it comes to weapons. Don't really need any weapons at all, in my opinion. That's why I didn't have them definitely going tight end because I just think it's like unnecessary. Now, the only thing with Tampa Bay, and I'm going to talk about a little bit with the defense, again, when you look at again, Devin White for them in the past and other players, and it's very similar to the offense as well as we were talking about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin and stuff. Like, they're kind of like aging out at this point. Like again, you're gonna have again. Don't get me wrong; these players gonna have another good year. But again, isn't players you're looking at that's gonna really stack up another 4 or 5 good years? Like again, they have a lot of players aging out, and I think they have a lot of players aging out on their defense. So for them going for an edge rusher in Kendrick Falk, obviously again we're talking about position of value on defense, and probably the most valuable position that they could possibly add on would be an edge rusher. I think that definitely helps them. And again, Tampa Bay is a team like we talked about in this division that's wide open where you add the right piece or two, you can win this division and make the playoffs. Anybody can make the playoffs in that team, whether they in that division, whether they deserve it or not. So I have them going Kendrick Fall.
Yeah, I mean, because we did watch the first round of the draft together last year. I was definitely a little surprised, although I did really like the pick, obviously, when they took Emeka Ibuka. And he had, I mean, had a great first half of the season, kind of slowed down in the second half, but the Bucks as a team really slowed down in the second half. I feel like their defense definitely has been lacking. Obviously, not the same championship caliber defense that we saw back when they won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady against the Chiefs. So this defense definitely does need some guys that can get after the quarterback. Obviously they got some older players. Levante David obviously got getting up there in age. You still got Vita Vea on the defensive line, but yeah, no, they definitely need some more youth on this defensive side of the ball. And I think if it wasn't last year, they definitely need to go with a defensive player in the first round. I mean, offensive line had some issues last year; it was a little banged up, so I could see that being an area that they address here too. But I think you got to go all in on the defense because, like you mentioned, the weapons that they have, both coming out of the backfield and the pass catchers for Baker Mayfield, they're definitely set there. Defense is the priority for them.
All right, so now we get into 16, and we have the Jets in this mock draft completely winning out on the value side. A guy that I believe is one of the best players in this entire draft, sliding all the way down to 16. Now, again, this probably won't happen. He'll probably go a lot earlier, but just the way our mock draft shaped out, this was a possibility that the Jets were able to select him at 16. Now, again, the biggest thing that's going to decide his pick as well, we talked about with the Chiefs at 9. They're going to take Jeremiah Love, we believe, if he's there. If he's not there, we could very well see them going Makai Lemon. I absolutely love Makai Lemon for the Jets. There's no other way to put it. Like again, like I said, a top five top 10 caliber guy going at 16, you completely win out. Again, add another weapon alongside Garrett Wilson because I had this debate with people last week. Like, again, Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson, I don't think panned out to the extent that a lot of people thought that they would pan out. Again, obviously, you could talk about the multitude of quarterbacks they had to play with, that not necessarily helping them. But at the same time, I never believed this Jets team had a true wide receiver one. I think Mekhi Lemon could be that. You're looking at a guy that's an elite route runner, very quick, gets really good separation, plays a lot bigger than he is. And then when you look at, like we said, we talked about this yesterday with the landscape of the NFL and how it's trending. You'll get a guy very similar like Jackson Smith-Njigba that runs elite routes that isn't the quickest and isn't the biggest, possibly being the best receiver in the entire league. So again, things are changing. It's not necessarily the biggest, fastest guy as a prospect. If you run elite routes and you have the ability to get open every single play like Mekhi Lemon has, this is a guy that again could be one of the best receivers in the league. And then when we look at him again, obviously his last year in the NFL, I mean, his last year in college football has been arguably the most impressive out of any receiver in college football. Him winning the Biletnikoff Award, going to the best receiver. And then also when you look at him, like I said, we talked about yesterday, the constant involvement and the ability to get open and win out in the slot. I mean, you're looking at a guy 7 times out of 12 games having 7+ receptions. So this just tells you this guy is consistently getting open and consistently winning out. I absolutely love the pick for the Jets. Not sure if it's actually going to happen, but the way our mock draft shaped out, he just happened to be there.
Yeah, again, I feel like for them, like they definitely can get a playmaker here. I would still probably lean towards them taking somebody for the defense. Because of how the defense finished last year. Again, does the offense need more playmakers? Absolutely. Could they? Would this be a good pick here? Absolutely. But and also, again, depends on what they end up doing at quarterback too, which is something that we'll have to keep an eye on this offseason. But I would still probably lean towards them going with a defensive player here, and going both defensive players with their first two picks.
Yep. So again, Jets could definitely go defense. Obviously, we know they want to build an identity on that side of the ball for Aaron Glenn. That's obviously where he specializes. Um, at number 17, we do have the Lions going with Jermod McCoy. Now, again, this is definitely a team that could have went offensive line. I kind of believe it's offensive line or secondary for this team. Obviously, a team with a ton of talent. I mean, when you look at their offense is absolutely prolific, and a team that again missed out on the playoffs this year that could very well be contending next year. I think Jamar McCoy definitely like shores up things for them. Again, it isn't a draft really known for cornerbacks. Obviously, we talked about Mansour Delane going number 13 this mock draft to the Rams. Jamar McCoy, the guy that's right up there with him. And again, I think at 17, I think it's the right pick for them. I also could definitely see Lyman as well.
Yeah, no, same with me. Offensive line, like I said, losing some guys on that side of the ball. Last year, and they tried to bring back Frank Ragnow, and then he like failed his physical. And you could tell the offensive line wasn't like it was the previous season when they won 15 games. So, and obviously with the quarterback like Jared Goff, who's not known for his mobility, more of that traditional pocket passer. You want to make sure that he has the best protection possible. And also this defense, although they have good defensive players, I feel like this is not a lockdown unit. So I definitely would like to see them go defensive player here too. Um, Either that or offensive line for them as well. I feel like those are where those are the areas they need to address.
All right, now we get to number 18, and I actually do want to talk about this team a little more than the actual pick because we talked about this yesterday on I don't know when we talked about this actually, but we were talking about the Minnesota Vikings at some point, and I believe Minnesota Vikings are at the state right now. Like again, obviously we all know they messed up not keeping Darnold. That's 100% true. But at the same time, I do believe this team, a lot of people aren't realizing, isn't the state that it was at a couple of years ago. I do think their offensive line was horrible last year. I do think there were times where JJ McCarthy really just had no chance. And then also you look at their running game as well. They're not going to have the pick to select Jeremiah Love. Obviously, they're at 18, but their running back room is also really bad. So I do think you want to shore up the offensive line. Not only if you believe in JJ McCarthy and are giving him another year, which is again up for debate because Obviously, they were talking about bringing in a quarterback as well, which I completely disagree with. But at the same time, we do not know what's going on in that room with JJ McCarthy. They might already think he's a bust. They might already think he has no shot, and they kind of might want to, maybe Kevin O'Connell wants to not only save his job but put his team in possible contention. Even though I don't think Kevin O'Connell necessarily is on the hot seat. But I do think their biggest need off is offensive line, just because again, the positions in their backfield that are completely unsure for them. I do think they should definitely add an offensive lineman. I do have Alavega Olane going to them, even though again they could use a tackle. I do believe again you could just move around the offensive line a little bit, and he was the best offensive line prospect available at this pick. But again, I do think again you could add stuff on the defense as well. I think this team is a lot farther away than people expect now, because they were looking at the Vikings over the last couple of years making the playoffs and having these guys again. Like, they don't really have a running back that they used to have. They don't really have the pass catchers that they used to have, because again, you look at Jordan Addison always being in trouble, and you look at TJ Hawkinson getting a lot older, not being the same player. Obviously, I still have Justin Jefferson there, but again, I do this team is like falsely looked at as a team that's like again being this elite team that just needs a quarterback, and I think it's much more than that for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, no, you're right with the other playmakers opposite of Justin Jefferson, and especially with the running game not being that great, Aaron Jones being an older running back, and they did bring in Jordan Mason, who I liked with the 49ers, but he wasn't really that productive for them. They did address the offensive line last offseason, but it didn't really pan out with the injuries that they suffered, guys constantly in and out. And whatever quarterback it was, behind center, struggle with the lack of protection. So, I don't really have an issue with this pick, going offensive line, and, whether they're going with JJ McCarthy or and they're bringing in a veteran. I think that's, not a bad pick there. The defense is pretty good. You could address uh, that side of the ball, but offensive line, I feel like would be the right selection for them here.
All right, now we get into pick 19. Kind of a weird pick. Panthers are one of those teams, again, I don't know how you feel about the Panthers, but to me, I feel like they're pretty solid all across the board in
I think
position
for them,
groups.
it could be like best player available.
It could be that. Again, he is actually the best player available on this mock, ironically. But also at the same time, like, I think they're pretty solid in all position groups, but they kind of have like nothing that puts them over the top. Like, they're in like this kind of weird state where,
Yeah,
like, again, they don't have many elite players, but they have solid players across the board that obviously helped them make the playoffs this year. And that might not be a bad thing in this division. You may be able to consistently win this division for years to come if you just have solid position groups, because again, this division really nobody is an elite team in this division, which is again weird, but it's that type of division. Um, it's going to be interesting to see for the Panthers, obviously, how Bryce Young continues to pan out. I, I'm kind of he is kind of growing on me a little bit, but again, just very inconsistent. Like, he has games where he plays really well, he has games where the Panthers have no shot. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how he pans out. There was a thought in my mind that they could go receiver, but then I thought back on it. I'm like, their receiver just won Offensive Rookie of the Year, a guy we love in Tedero McMillan. They did draft a receiver earlier, not that long ago, in Xavier Leggett. I'm like, they have Coker there. Like, I
yeah.
kind of don't see them going receiver here, just because again they've done that multiple times and it just hit for them last year. I have them going Caleb Banks, kind of like what you said, best player available type of notion. But then also at the same time, defensive line is kind of a need if they do have a need. That's just kind of where I leaned. I don't really have much strong opinion about this pick, like again the rest of the picks in this draft. But again, Panthers just kind of at a weird state. Like, again, they're solid across the board in position groups, but again, in my opinion, they don't really have many players that takes them over the top, which is I don't know. I don't know if you want to be in that spot of mediocrity. We'll see that.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. Like I said, I guess best player available for them. Winning the division with 8 wins. They don't play in a powerhouse division. Um, they were a frustrating team last year. And Bryce Young's been kind of a frustrating player because even going back to the year before, after he got benched, you definitely saw a better version of him, but still, like, it's still mixed in with a lot of inconsistencies. And against some pretty good teams, showed out. I mean, particularly against the Rams. And then obviously, the Panthers went into Lambeau and they knocked off the Packers too. So they did have some impressive wins to their resume. But then also you'd have them lose to teams like, when the Saints before we were on the Tyler Shuck hype train. And you're kind of scratching your head like, how did they lose that? Always balls out against the Falcons though. He's kind of had his way with them the last couple years. But yeah, no, for me, yeah, again, it's best player available for the Panthers. Like you said, they're solid, all around. They addressed the offensive line last offseason. Going to be interesting to see what happens with their running back room, their receiver, Tetsuo McMillan won Offensive Rookie of the Year. So, I mean, could they add another weapon to that receiver room? Maybe. But yeah, I don't have a problem with the selection here.
All right, now at number 20, you have the Cowboys second time in the first round. I have them going now. I know the question may be like, hey, why do you have them selecting two edges in the first round, two of the same positions? I think TJ Parker's a guy that is a debate whether he's classified as an edge or a linebacker, somebody that's diverse, somebody that, again, probably the most diverse secondary player, I mean, most diverse defensive player in this draft outside of, again, Arrow, Reese, and Caleb Downs. So, again, I do think he brings diversity to his defense, something that they do need. They do need a guy that can play multiple positions because, again, this defense is what you want to address. I believe I'm going to have no pushback from you that the Cowboys should go defensive players back to back again with these first round picks. And I also said, again, same thing with Peter Woods. I do believe Peter Woods and TJ Parker, two guys that were classified a lot higher going into the year as NFL prospects. Again, my opinion on them really hasn't changed throughout the year. I get it, Clemson was a disappointment, but I believe these guys, again, like, are top end talents in this draft. I kind of like absolutely love this pick for the Cowboys. Even though I did have them going Cassius Howell a little early at 12, I kind of think they get the value back with TJ Parker at 20. Again, a versatile player that I think they need. Again, this guy isn't going to be Micah Parsons, but you got to find ways to shore up this defense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with taking both defensive players. I mean, maybe not necessarily taking two edge rushers. Maybe you take a linebacker and an edge rusher, or a linebacker, and a safety, maybe something like that, or an edge rusher and a safety, maybe adding someone to the secondary as well. I could see that. But yeah, like we said it already, this team needs to go all in on their defense. So two defensive players, that's what they should be prioritizing in the first round.